Once a month here at 12 News, Governor Ducey will be joining us in studio to talk about the issues facing our state. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
How's the summer been?
Well, it's been hot, but it's been good, and everybody's getting back in the routine with school starting, and that's how I like it.
What do the Duceys do to get away from the Arizona heat?
Well, we like to go up to Flagstaff a lot. We spend a lot of time in Flagstaff, and we got some California time as well this year.
Where do you go in California?
We go to La Jolla. Yeah, we go to La Jolla. We've been going there for nearly 20 years, and actually got several days there. The boys and Angela always get there.
You know, what's so funny, I'll bet that it's like not even leaving Arizona, because if you go over to San Diego or La Jolla or Coronado, almost every other license plate is an Arizona plate.
And you run into a lot of Arizonans over there. I hope the Californians appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. We're giving them plenty of our money. All right, well, you made news on Wednesday appointing Bill Montgomery to the Arizona Supreme Court. The timing of the appointment is interesting because he is under an ethics investigation by the state bar. Did that give you any kind of a moment of pause before you made the appointment?
Mark, I saw that as politics. Okay, Bill has been our county attorney since 2010. He's won re-election. He's been rumored to be a candidate for this court position for some time. Right. He's been thoroughly vetted, not only by the citizens of Maricopa County, but by the Judicial Nominating Committee. He had an excellent interview, and I want to give a compliment to the committee. They sent me 7 excellent candidates, and they've sent me a number of candidates for each judicial selection that's been put in front of me as governor, and Bill was the most worthy candidate.
Now, when you say a political hit job on Montgomery, what do you mean?
I mean that the timing was very suspicious, and Bill had excelled in the interviews, and I knew after Labor Day, I'd thought about all of the files, reviewed them over the long weekend. Bill was going to be the announced candidate, so we made the announcement.
All right. There is no question that immigration is probably the biggest issue for any governor of a border state. We have a large, vibrant Hispanic population here, but we also have a huge segment of our population that is fearful and concerned about the effects of illegal immigration and how it will affect us. And it's not only happening here, but it's happening nationally. What is your blueprint as the governor of a border state on how to deal with this?
Well, I would say first and foremost, it's border security. It's why we beefed up the border strike force. We want to make sure that the bad guys, the drug cartels, human traffickers, child sex traffickers, that we're stopping them, that we're arresting the people that are selling these fentanyl and these dangerous drugs that have crept into our communities. So that's one issue. It's a separate issue, and there's a focus there. On the other side, we've worked very hard on the economic development. I mean, Mexico's our #1 trade partner ×4. We've had a real focus there, and we've built that relationship. And then the third part of it is the immigration component. This is a federal issue. I think there's enough blame to go around in Washington, D.C. We've seen both Democratic leadership under Barack Obama and Republican leadership. There's been no reform. There's been no movement on it. I feel like we've navigated it pretty well in Arizona with the focus on border security and making sure that our state remains a place with opportunity for all.
It's a shame, because I think the Gang of 8 might have had a good plan, and it just never happened.
Well, we see nothing but gridlock in Congress. And like I said, we've been seeing this since about 2007. A lot of people were asking me during the 2016 campaign, when this became such a topical national issue. I said, well, this isn't new to us in Arizona. This is a sequel. We've been dealing with this for over a decade. Now the whole country's aware of it.
How frustrating is it for you? Because at the end of the day, you're also a tax-paying citizen, an American. You live in Arizona, a border state that's definitely affected by immigration. How frustrating, oh, by the way, you have to be the governor of that state. So how frustrating is it for you to see that partisan gridlock in Washington, where year after year plans come up and plans go away and nothing gets done?
Well, it's frustrating to me because I think it's solvable. I think Washington, D.C. could learn something from Arizona. We had 92% of our legislation passed last year, a year in which we balanced the budget and put money in the rainy day fund. So I know that this is a solvable problem, but it's not getting done in Washington, D.C. for whatever reason. I'm going to stick to my knitting and my day job, which is our state.
Well, let me just ask you, since you're here, if President Trump called you and said, look, Governor, you deal with this on a daily basis, much more than I do. Or they put together a coalition of border state governors and they said, fix it. What would your input be?
Well, first, if the president were to call, of course, you take that. I mean, it's a call to duty, and I do think there's a solution around border security, and then what we're going to do in terms of immigration policy going forward. You know, today in Arizona we have more jobs available than we have people to fill them. Typically, we've been able to fix that issue with a good immigration policy. Now, I want to make sure that American workers are having rising paychecks, and in Arizona we're number 3 in the country in terms of the rise in those paychecks. So that says we're doing something right in the economy. But I think this is about climbing the economic ladder. So it's not only people at the top, the software engineers, the folks that we have openings for in all our high, most profitable technology companies, but it's also at the beginning level, that service economy, hospitality, agriculture, which we're very proud of here in Arizona. It's a combination of that. It's a balance. And I think a lot of these answers are what we see on some of the cable nightly news is a partisan solution or something that's black and white, rather than a balanced approach that takes into account border security. We do have real issues at the border, both from a security standpoint, and we've all seen the humanitarian pictures.
What would you do about DACA?
About DACA, I think in this country we've got a pretty long record of that we don't penalize children for the mistakes of their parents. So I've been outspoken on this. I think kids that graduate from Arizona high school are Arizona kids. We've already invested the money that it took to get them through high school. I think they should have opportunities here in our state. Many of them are leaving our state to go elsewhere, take their talents elsewhere. I don't think that makes any sense.
You know, the more we talk about it, and just thinking out loud here as we sit here, it would make total sense to me to take the governor of Arizona, the governor of Texas, and other border governors and get them together and say, you deal with this all the time, fix it. That call's never come, though.
Well, I think, one, it's a respect for our federal system of government. I mean, there are things we do at the state level. There are expectations from our federal government.
But you all have great insight and input to offer.
Well, as border governors, we feel this every day. We feel the consequences every day. And I do think as a governor, you're a chief executive. You're a problem solver. You try to move an agenda forward. I see this when we get the governors together in the Conference of Governors. It's not a harshly partisan event. I don't think you'd be governor if you were harshly partisan. You have to be governor of all the people. That's the posture I've tried to bring to the position, and that's what I've found from Greg Abbott. And even though Governor Brown and I didn't agree on a lot of issues, we could have positive conversations, especially when we were trying to help each other, whether the issue was wildfire or a catastrophe that was happening in one of our states. And Susana Martinez was the former governor of New Mexico. We have a new governor there, Lujan Grisham. But I do think we'd be able to come to a solution on this, because as executives, that's what you're paid to do, is make decisions.
I think it's something that every Arizonan would like to see. No matter how they feel about immigration, I think everyone agrees that it needs to be addressed. It needs to be a #1 topic, or at least in the top 2 or 3 for 2020.
I think it'll be a big part of the political debate, which is somewhat unfortunate, because you would have thought we'd be able to solve this by now. But like I said, there is one side does not want to see the other have any latitude. And I think in the solution to something as complex as this, you have to have some give and take on each side.
Well, one of the things that I really appreciate about this segment is that you're not only going to talk to us, but you're going to talk to our viewers. And we have our first viewer question, and it happens to be on the border wall.
Hello, my name is Jimmy Hale. I live in Yuma, Arizona, and this is my question to the governor. How come the wall isn't built already? You're separating families, and you're disturbing the peace in Yuma, Arizona with other families. Thank you so much.
Fair question?
So if I heard the question right, he was asking me why the wall isn't built already.
Right.
There is a wall or a fence. There's a definite physical barrier in Yuma, Arizona. It actually has worked rather well. The problem on the border, if you go all 279 miles of the border, is there are many parts that are wide open and unprotected. And by that I mean there may be a Border Strike Force agent, there may be someone from ICE, but there's hours and much time when there's no one there. No one wants to see families separated. There's a humanitarian crisis coming up from the Northern Triangle of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. I believe that that's something we're going to need federal intervention on. The wall is a federal issue. I went back to Washington, D.C. I'd never been to an inauguration of a president. As governor, you're invited. I went back a day early to meet with then General John Kelly, who was going to be the Homeland Security Secretary, and I said, General, one ask from Arizona, that your first trip be to our state. We've been dealing with this border crisis for over a decade. True to his word, he was here 3 weeks later after he was confirmed. We went to the border. It was a room where the temperature was pretty high after the rhetoric of the campaign. I do see the people on the border who have the relationship. I see the citizens of Arizona. They want to see this public safety measure happen. And again, without pointing fingers, this is a congressional federal duty. We're doing everything we can in Arizona. We funded the Border Strike Force so that we can have those boots on the ground, the additional force to go after the bad guys. That's not the families that are being separated. That's part of the humanitarian crisis, and it's a separate issue.
And that's got to be one of the hardest parts of this is to deal with the immigration crisis, but to do it with compassion and kindness.
Well, I think there's a definite American values that we can bring to what's happening here, and people want to come to our country. This is how it's been for over 243 years. Immigration has been something that has fueled our economy. We're the largest, most successful economy in the history of the world. We should have a immigration policy that people can comprehend and understand, and one that is compassionate and one that benefits our country.
Recreational marijuana is going to be, there's no doubt, on the 2020 ballot here. I want to get your thoughts on whether or not you think it will pass and should pass, but first, are you happy with what the revenue generated from medical marijuana has done for this state, and are you satisfied with our system?
Well, the revenue is the revenue from medical marijuana. That was something that was passed by the citizens in 2010. We haven't done much except to try to reform and make that system work. I mean, that's what we're required to do under the law. Recreational marijuana was on the ballot in 2016. This was the only state in the country to defeat recreational marijuana. I'm someone who said that I thought it was the proposition, Prop 205, was bad law and would have changed the state. When something happens through the initiative process, it's permanent and unchangeable. So I think the letter of the law, what the initiative says, is very important. We're doing our homework on what this legislation says, but I also came out 3 years ago and said, you know, as the father of 3 sons and the son of a cop, I couldn't see it being a good idea.
And you still feel that way going forward, that Arizona should not be a state that has recreational marijuana?
I want to understand the language and what the policy will be, but there will be plenty of time to talk about the initiatives, and I'll be happy to come back between now and November of 2020.
Okay, well, I want to talk about some of the terrible situations we've had with texting and driving. It is absolutely a tragedy, Governor, anytime we lose a first responder. We lost Salt River Officer Clayton Townsend when he was hit, we know now, by someone who was texting. A lot of our viewers wanted to ask you about the new law, which in part was brought on by his death. Let's take a look at this text question. This comes through a text team 12 from Carol of Sun City. She says, why are we waiting? And it's something that's crossed my mind too. Why are we waiting to enact the no texting and driving law? It should be done immediately. It's too dangerous not to. Would you reconsider? Is there anything that could be done to move that timetable up?
So I want to say, Carol, thank you for the question. It's a great question, and it's a very fair question. The law is in effect. The law has passed. The law is in effect. What will be a delay is the penalty, is the fine. But I have members of my team that have been pulled over, and law enforcement has told them that texting and driving is illegal. This is something that was cultural to the state. So rather than surprising everyone with the law and many significant fines that would be out there, we wanted a time of implementation so that people could say to each other, that's illegal now. You can't do that.
But doesn't that sort of take the teeth out of the law if you're not penalizing people that are pulled over?
I think what we are trying to do is change behavior, and we want to use public policy. The law is a teacher, and what we saw is that distracted driving not only caused accidents, it caused deaths. I give a real salute to Clayton Townsend's family, who came down to the state capitol and advocated on behalf of this law. And we did think that the grandfather period, so that people could begin to change their habits, was the right thing to do.
Look, you have kids. What do you tell them about texting and driving? And how about your hammer and the teeth in your law in the Ducey household?
Well, I tell them the same thing. I'm a parent like any other parent, but I've let them know what is possible, how they could harm themselves, how they could harm others, and to not do it. It's against the law.
All right. Before you got into politics, you were a businessman. And I'm wondering if politics was always on your radar. You were state treasurer here, and now you're the governor. Was politics always on Doug Ducey's radar?
No, politics wasn't on my radar. Selling ice cream was on my radar. I like to say that you get a lot of undeserved popularity when you sell ice cream for a living, but that all goes away when you balance your first budget. I was 46 years old the first time I went to Washington, D.C.
So why'd you make the jump?
I went to Washington, D.C. on an educational trip. I'd sold my company. I was somewhat fascinated with the public policy process. And then in 2009, Arizona, if you remember, we had a $731 million credit line from Bank of America to pay teachers, fill potholes, or provide any essential state service. I somewhat naively thought that a business person could come in and make a difference. There was an opening in that treasurer's office. I ran for treasurer. 4 years later was the first opening in the governor's office in 12 years, and I threw my hat in the ring, and here I am.
And speaking of that, and the issues that you tackle on a daily basis, first as a treasurer and then as the governor, I'm wondering if there is anything that you saw as an issue with Arizona coming in as governor that you thought that you, Doug Ducey, would be able to tackle, and it has just proven to be your bugaboo.
Well, I would say I'm very proud of our record as a business person and somebody that grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and came here for school and not only raised my family here, but built my business here. I see Arizona as a land of opportunity, and I want to make sure that was expanded and protected. I think if you take a look at our economy today, our growth, we've got a lot of evidence that we're peaking on that with opportunity to even go further and improve. It was also, I knew what a great state we had. I knew how attractive this was. 70% of the adults in our state were born somewhere else. They moved here because they saw it as a better place. I wanted that to also be our reputation around the country and around the world. And I'm proud that we're being seen as a place not only in which to do business, but we're hosting Super Bowls, we're hosting NCAA Final Fours, we're hosting college football national championships. These are very positive things for our state, for our economy, and most of all for the citizens.
I think years from now, when people look back on Doug Ducey's leadership in the state, they will talk about one of the things will be red for Ed. And we saw this, I remember sitting here with you.
I was sitting on that side of the table.
This tremendous wave of red marching through downtown Phoenix for one cause. Now, as you look back on it, how satisfied are you with what happened?
Well, I want to say first and foremost, when I came into office, we had a $1 billion deficit. There were no good decisions that could be made. We were tightening our belt. You fast forward now 5 years later, we've got a $1 billion surplus and a $1 billion balance in our rainy day fund. So what the teachers needed was a raise. I'm on the side of the teachers. We were able to put the 20 by 2020 plan forward, where we had a 10% raise to teachers last year, 5% this year, and 5% next year. I think more needs to be done in education. I value our teachers. We have a teacher shortage. We put together the Teachers Academy. We're trying to bring more people into teaching. But I do think we were able to get them a pay raise. We were able to demonstrate how much we value and appreciate the good work that they do. But there's always going to be more that needs to be done on education.
All right, and that brings us to the second chapter. If you turn the page on the teachers, it deals with counselors, and that takes us to our next viewer question. We are worst in the country when it comes to the counselor to student ratio. Roughly 900 students, I think, for every counselor. Let's hear what our viewer had to say about that.
Hello, my name is Ivan Quintana. I'm from the city of Mesa, and I would like to ask Governor Ducey, what are his plans for addressing the lack of school counselors in high schools across my city?
I hear it all the time from our viewers.
I do as well,
terrible.
and the statistics that you're referencing are statistics before last year's budget, when we moved $20 million for school counselors additional to what we're doing. I agree with Ivan. We do need more school counselors. We have an epidemic inside our schools of social and emotional disconnection, depression, and suicide. We want to have a real focus on having these kids have a counselor available. So it's for the kids that need it. It's also for the kids that are planning on attainment post-high school. They need that counselor. They need that teacher in the classroom. We've been able to move significant dollars additional into K-12 to have some flexibility around those dollars, and that's dollars that are included in the $661 million that we were able to put into K-12 over and above previous year.
How are we going to catch up with the rest of the country?
Well, by adding more money every year. We're going to add more money every year. The dollars that I'm talking about are the dollars that are over and above inflation. That's what's mandated by law. That would be the minimum. What I've tried to do is be responsible, plan ahead, but make sure that we're supplementing these formulas so that we can hire teachers, we can put counselors in the classroom, we can put cops on campus to make sure our schools are safe.
Absolutely. Okay, our next question comes about from one of our viewers about homelessness in our state. There is no doubt, Governor, it's a real problem. Let's hear from her, and then I'm going to get your take on what she has to say.
Hi, my name is Gail Helmer. I live in Mesa, Arizona. I'd like to ask Governor Ducey, what is he doing about the homeless population in Arizona? I see so many on the streets, and what are we doing to try to get these people homes? It's so important that we try to help.
So, Seal, it's a great question. It's something we're working with the Arizona Department of Housing to make certain that the people that are in low-income housing can maintain low-income housing. It's almost counterintuitive because our economy is booming right now, along with the national economy. And where you see the largest homeless crisis is in places like San Francisco and Seattle, because people have been priced out of the market. So we're working within public policy, the Department of Housing. I talked with Mayor Gallego about this earlier this week, ways that we can address not only getting people off the street and into affordable housing, but making sure that people don't lose their residence while the economy continues to improve.
And when you talk about affordability, we had a story last night, which is great for homeowners, and that is that real estate probably will go up 5.9%, which is a pretty good rate in the current market. How do you keep us from becoming another California because when you moved here from Ohio, Arizona was an affordable, beautiful place to live. It's still beautiful, but it's not as affordable as it used to be.
Well, I would say there's a reason that Maricopa County is the fastest growing county in the country, that Phoenix is the fastest growing city. We do have a incredible quality of life. We have economic opportunity, and we are affordable. We're not going to become California on my watch, I'll tell you that much, Mark. California has made many mistakes in public policy. Those are mistakes that we're avoiding. You're seeing that we're lowering and simplifying taxes, we're reducing regulation, we're focusing on public safety. That's my roadmap for success for Arizona. It's been a winning plan.
Opioids. I was lucky enough, because it was very eye-opening, to spend 24 hours with Phoenix Fire earlier this year. Mm-hmm. And I went in with the notion that every time they roll out of the firehouse, they're going to a fire. But the truth is 75% of the calls, if not more, were opioid overdoses, which is why all of the fire trucks now carry Narcan on board for all of these. And I'm just wondering where you stand on the current opioid crisis when it comes to Arizona.
So we had a Opioid Epidemic Act 2 years ago in Arizona. It was a way that we could bring the full force of public policy, Democrats and Republican. It was a thorough, thoughtful, aggressive plan. We've been able to reduce the amount of prescriptions. We've been able to reduce by 95% the amount of prescriptions to opioid naive patients. There were just too many of these prescriptions happening. I want everyone to know that relies on this, that is a burn victim or
chronic pain.
Chronic pain. We're not going to get in the way of their prescription, but we wanted to make certain that this addiction epidemic that we have, that we could stem the tide on that. The statistics have been promising in terms of what we've been able to reduce. We've seen 18% of the deaths and emergency-related calls have been around fentanyl, which is an illegal, dangerous drug that is part of the border crisis. But I think Arizona is leading in terms of what we've done on public policy to affect this opioid crisis, and there's more that needs to get done. We've seen this with other drug crises in the past. I think the larger issue, which we're going to continue to have to deal with, is addiction.
Yeah, in fact, we got many questions about, you brought up fentanyl. Kim writes, as an addiction counselor, fentanyl addiction is skyrocketing, hitting all age groups. What are you doing to continually funnel money into that issue?
So some of this is the dollars that we're putting into K-12 education, the dollars that we're putting into counselors, the support of law enforcement, the hiring of additional Department of Public Safety officers, 43 hired in last year's budget, reinforcement on the border strike force. So it's all hands on deck, and it's not only the state resources, this is local law enforcement, this is border sheriffs, this is the combination of what we call the border strike force.
All right, wrong way drivers. It's a topic you knew we would get to because it's an issue that no matter where you watch TV, and we hope it's 12 News at night, we have a story at least once a week on a wrong way driver. And while I think that the state has done great things with some of the wrong way detection things, there's no question we're a long way from saying it's a non-issue. A question from James Meyer on Facebook. He goes, what are you doing about all the wrong way drivers in our state?
So we're doing a number of things, and this is something that I would like to just stop and prevent. We've added dollars to the Department of Public Safety. We've brought on 6 new officers to focus specifically on wrong way driving. We have used technology to have detection devices on our freeways, so drivers that are on the freeways are alerted. This is, again, part of the substance use and abuse addiction problem. Often a wrong way driver is severely impaired. Oftentimes there are people that have been arrested before and are behind the wheel again. I think there's more that we can do in public policy. I want people to know, in terms of the population of our state and the amount of wrong way driving incidents that we have, it's about the equivalent of what you'd see in the western United States, but it's still, to me, and I think to James, it's something that's preventable, and I want to do everything we can to avoid it.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I can't thank you enough for coming down. And I really think that as time goes on and people see that we really are answering their questions, this segment will continue to prosper. And it's a great two-way conversation for you to have with your constituents and with our viewers who follow these issues every night on 12 News. So, Governor, I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Really good to see you.
You
Thanks.
too.